Good morning. It's March 21st, and this is To My Liberal Friends. Joe Biden continues to make statements that don't either make sense or, in the case of tax policy, just don't add up. He loves to talk about people paying their fair share, but never mentions how much of the federal tax burden high earners bear. If he did more, people might understand that these talking points are fiction. Last Saturday, Biden tweeted, "How many of you believe he's the one actually tweeting out these comments?" And I'm quote, "Look, I think you should be able to be a billionaire if you can earn it, but you just pay your fair share. I think you ought to pay a minimum tax of 25%. It's about basic fairness," end quote. But he was not done, or at least the staff member tweeting was not done, because then he made the statement that, quote, "The average tax billionaire pay 3%, end quote. First, this contradicts the statement made by the White House in February, where they claimed that billionaires weren't paying enough because their average rate was 8%. The question is how they come up with these numbers. The answer is simple. They calculate what are known as unrealized gains and factor that into someone's income. They don't mention this is not real income because the money's not available to the person. But this helps them with their talking points, so they continue to make these inane statements. I think it'd be useful to give an example that most of the middle class can understand. You purchased a home and you live in it for 20 years. Due to inflation, the value of that home has risen. It cost you about $300,000 when you purchased it, but if you sold it today, the market would value it close to $750,000. Under Biden's tax math, you should be taxed on that gain of $450,000, or at least it should be calculated into your income to show that you pay a lower tax rate. But if you've not sold the house, so that money's not in your pocket. And what would happen if Biden was able to start taxing unrealized gains and the value of the property plummets in a recession? Will you get a refund for what you paid? I don't count on that. And just before everyone gets worried, these are just talking points for Biden and some of his more liberal Democratic friends. Taxing unrealized gains will never pass in the Congress, and Biden knows that. So he feels free to make these outrageous statements. It reminds me of Senate Majority Chuck Schumer parroting Biden and saying the wealthy should pay their fair share. Of course, Chuck changes his tune when it comes to the limit on the amount of state and local taxes, the SALT deduction, that you can deduct. Under current law, over 85% of taxpayers took the standard deduction and filed with a short form. This is exactly what was predicted when the tax bill was passed in 2017. But it capped the state and local tax deduction at $10,000, and that did not sit well with politicians from states like New York, New Jersey, Illinois, and California. They've all got high state taxes. So what Chuck really means is he wants the wealthy to pay their fair share, just not his wealthy constituents. So here's some real facts. According to the Tax Foundation, the average income rate was 13.6%, and the top 1% paid an average rate of 26%. The top 1% share of federal income taxes rose from 38.8% to 42.3%. The top 50% of all taxpayers paid 97.7% of all federal individual income taxes, and while the bottom 50% paid the remaining 2.3%. Tell us again, Joe Biden, who's paying their fair share? Using this term fair share is so disingenuous because there's no strict definition. But I might suggest that since the bottom 50% are only paying 2.3% of the federal income tax burden, then they may not be paying their fair share. Now, I'm not really going to suggest that, but I do get tired of hearing liberals claim that high earners should be paying their fair share, which they mean more. And before one of my liberal friends jumps up and claims that the lower incomes are paying more because they also pay the FICA tax that supports Social Security and Medicare. Of course, they ignore that these programs that you pay into so that you receive a benefit when you retire, so you would have to start deducting any payments you get for Social Security and hospital bills that are paid for Medicare. And they also forget the surtax that's in place for Medicare. When you exceed $200,000 in income, you pay a surtax of 0.9% of that income. In today's inflationary world, that number is not that high and includes many that would consider themselves middle class. But the point is, higher incomes are paying more for Medicare benefits that are equal for everyone. Being honest, this has become a tired saying with the left, constantly saying higher incomes need to pay more taxes. As I've said before, they're relying on the fact that there will always be more people making less than those making more. But the moment someone gets above one of those imaginary thresholds, they find a reason to object to them as well. The real issue here is not who is paying, but rather how much we are spending. We could raise taxes exponentially on high earners and still not cut deficit spending. Biden talks about cutting the deficit, but does not address the root cause of the deficit, prolific spending. And if we were serious about reducing the national debt, he would take a knife to his budget and start cutting everywhere that's not absolutely necessary. Stop trying to play class warfare by talking about taxing one group so he can hand out things to another group. Start realizing that we have a national crisis coming down the pike, and unless we start addressing it now, it will be too late. The Congressional Budget Office is now projecting that the interest on the national debt will increase this year by 35% to a total of $640 billion. That's just the interest. By the end of 2022, federal debt held by the public is projected to equal 98% of GDP. The rapid growth of nominal GDP, which reflects both high inflation and the continued growth of real GDP, that is GDP adjusted to remove the effects of inflation, helps hold down the amount of debt relative to the nation's output in 2022 and 23. In CBO's projections, debt as a percentage of GDP begins to rise in 2024, surpasses its historical high in 2031 when it reaches 107%, and continues to climb thereafter reaching 185% of GDP by 2052. By the year 2032, the interest on the national debt could well exceed $1 trillion a year. And we're all to blame because we cannot look past tomorrow, and we like the government programs that benefit us without any regard to the impact. It will have to fall on our children and grandchildren. Shame on Joe Biden, shame on Congress, and shame on all of us for allowing this to happen. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, please hit the subscribe button and recommend to your friends. Thank you.